The world is no stranger to Meghan Markle's journey. From a Hollywood actress to the Duchess of Sussex, her life has been under an intense magnifying glass, constantly examined, critiqued, and dissected by both the media and the public. But there's one truth that has long remained hidden, until now. Imagine this. One of the most intimate, personal aspects of your life, the very thing you've kept secret for years, suddenly being thrust into the spotlight. The details, once known only to a select few, now exposed for the world to see. The stakes are high when the personal becomes public, and for Meghan Markle, that moment has finally arrived. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. In a shocking turn of events, Meghan Markle's private medical records have been leaked. These are not just any ordinary records. These documents contain explosive revelations that could shake the very foundation of her carefully constructed public persona. For years, Meghan has been known as a loving mother, a woman who has faced the challenges of motherhood, and one who has been lauded for her role as a devoted parent to both Archie and Lilibet. But what if everything we thought we knew about her pregnancies was a lie? The leaked records reveal a truth that will stun the world. Meghan Markle was never able to carry children. This revelation casts a shadow over everything we thought we knew about the Duchess of Sussex and raises countless questions. How could this be? Was she hiding something all along? What does this mean for Archie and Lilibet, the children who have been at the center of her royal narrative? And how will the public react when they realize that one of the most talked about women of the 21st century may have been living with a secret far more personal and far-reaching than anyone imagined? In this story, we will explore the medical condition that has shaped Meghan Markle's life behind closed doors. We will delve into how her private struggles were never revealed to the public, how her image as a mother was carefully curated, and how this bombshell disclosure could change everything. But more than just the medical facts, we'll examine the emotional fallout that will surely ripple through her life, her marriage to Prince Harry, and the royal family itself. It all started with a single leak, a whisper, a moment of vulnerability that was never meant to be exposed. The world got a glimpse of something real, raw, and deeply personal. But what does it mean for Meghan Markle now, and how will the royal family respond? Will this newfound truth cement Meghan's place in history, or will it tear apart the carefully crafted image she has worked so hard to build? Stay with us as we uncover the shocking truth behind the medical leak and the fallout that follows. This is a story of secrets, revelations, and the emotional complexities that come with living under the weight of public scrutiny. You won't want to miss what happens next. It all started with a whisper. In the vast, sprawling world of secrets and rumors, there are moments when the truth slips through the cracks, unstoppable, relentless. This time, it wasn't the tabloids or the paparazzi. It wasn't a source close to the royal family or an anonymous insider feeding gossip to the press. This leak came from an entirely different place, one that no one saw coming. Meghan Markle's own medical records. The day the leak surfaced, the world was caught off guard. It wasn't just another sensational headline. This was something different. For weeks, there had been whispers about Meghan's private life, stories of difficulties behind closed doors, of marital strains, and the heavy toll of royal life. But this leak, this was personal. This was more than a royal scandal. It was a glimpse into Meghan's most intimate struggles. The documents, filled with medical terminology, private diagnoses, and personal details, were quickly seized upon by the media, igniting a firestorm of speculation. The initial shockwaves spread like wildfire across every platform imaginable. For days, social media buzzed with hashtags and trending topics. Hashtag Meghan Markle medical records and hashtag shocking revelations filled feeds. Within hours, the world was consumed by the question, what did these documents really say? The story began with the leak itself. It wasn't immediately clear who was behind it, but that didn't matter to the press. It was a rare gift for the media machine, a juicy, irresistible story that ticked every box: scandal, betrayal, mystery. There was only one thing the press wanted to know: who leaked the documents, and what could they reveal? At first, the details seemed like rumors, unverified, speculative. But as the hours passed, the story began to unfold, and the public learned more about the contents of the medical records. The documents revealed a long-buried secret. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, had a medical condition that prevented her from carrying children. It was a revelation that shattered everything people thought they knew about her. For years, Meghan had been portrayed as a proud mother, overcoming the challenges of parenthood under the public eye. Her pregnancies had been a symbol of joy and hope. The public adored the idea of a royal family embracing modernity and inclusivity, and Meghan's story was an important part of that narrative. But now, the world was being asked to reconsider everything. As the documents were released, an air of disbelief lingered over the media landscape. Was this real? Could this be true? Meghan, who had already navigated the complexities of royal life, now faced a new challenge, an even more personal one. How would she respond to this leak? Would she stay silent, or would she confront it head-on? The questions kept coming, and the world watched with bated breath. Behind closed doors, Meghan and Harry must have been grappling with their own questions. The leaked documents were more than just a violation of privacy. They were a bombshell that threatened to undo the very foundation of their carefully constructed lives. For Meghan, this was no longer about playing the role of the Duchess or even the compassionate humanitarian she had been celebrated for being. This was her health, her identity, and the truth about her journey to motherhood. For Harry, the implications were immense. Could he stand by Meghan through this? Or would the public's response force him into a corner where he had no choice but to publicly address the situation? The couple, who had already distanced themselves from royal life and media scrutiny, were now once again thrust into the center of the storm. It seemed that no matter how far they tried to run, the past had a way of catching up with them. In this case, a past they had kept hidden from the world. The medical condition revealed in the leak wasn't just any ordinary ailment. It was a condition that affected a woman's ability to conceive and carry a child to term. It was a deeply personal revelation, one that Meghan had kept to herself for years. And yet, here it was, splashed across front pages, dissected by commentators and analyzed by doctors, experts, and the general public alike. As the leak spread, experts weighed in. Some were sympathetic, calling for privacy and respect for Meghan's personal struggles. Others were less kind, suggesting that the leak was merely another chapter in the drama that had surrounded the Sussexes since their departure from royal duties. Was this a deliberate attempt to manipulate public opinion? Was this the beginning of a larger narrative about Meghan's authenticity? Or was it, simply, an act of betrayal? The intensity of the leak's impact was felt in many ways. Meghan Markle had been an advocate for transparency and openness throughout her public career. But now, the truth about her personal health, her fertility struggles, and the challenges she had faced in silence were no longer hers to control. The leak left her vulnerable in a way that few could understand. And yet, as the world grappled with the shocking truth, the question lingered. How much of what we thought we knew about Meghan Markle was true? How much of the woman we had seen in the headlines, the Duchess we had admired or criticized, was shaped by the things she had kept hidden from the world? The release of these medical records brought with it a new wave of revelations. It wasn't just about a single diagnosis. It was about everything that had been concealed beneath the surface for so long. Meghan's struggle with fertility was not just an isolated incident. It was a part of a larger story about what it meant to be a public figure, a royal, and a woman who had been thrust into a world where privacy was a luxury she could no longer afford. But despite the shock, the questions continued to grow. Was this leak an accident, or was it part of a larger plan? Who stood to gain from such a dramatic disclosure? And perhaps most importantly, how would Meghan Markle navigate the fallout from this deeply personal breach of privacy? From the moment Meghan Markle entered the royal spotlight, her life became an open book. Her relationship with Prince Harry captured hearts around the world, and their whirlwind romance was the stuff of modern fairy tales. But beneath the glitz and glamour of royal weddings, global tours, and charity work, one aspect of Meghan's life remained intensely private: her journey to motherhood. For years, Meghan had been open about her desire to have children. During her engagement interview with Harry, she spoke with radiant excitement about the prospect of starting a family. "We're hoping to have a little bit of a family," she said, flashing a smile. This brief comment was more than just a statement. It was a signal to the world that Meghan and Harry, like so many young couples, wanted to build a family of their own. But as with many things in Meghan's life, what the public saw wasn't the whole story. The announcement of Meghan's first pregnancy in 2018 was met with jubilation. The world eagerly followed the news, awaiting updates as Meghan's belly grew and her public appearances continued. For months, every step Meghan took was covered in excruciating detail, from the outfits she wore to the books she read during her pregnancy. And when Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor was born in May 2019, the excitement was palpable. He was the first child of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the first grandchild of Prince Charles, and the newest addition to the British royal family. The baby boy became an instant global sensation, his birth marked by a mixture of joy and curiosity from the public. But as the world celebrated, Meghan and Harry found themselves at the center of a complex and demanding new phase of life. The intense scrutiny Meghan faced during her pregnancy was just the beginning of the challenges she would face as a mother. The pressure on her was immense, from royal duties to navigating public expectations. Meghan's every move was under the microscope, and in those early days, there was little room for the private, personal experiences that come with motherhood. Behind the scenes, Meghan and Harry struggled with the realities of their new life. The couple, having just left their royal duties in early 2020, found themselves in an unfamiliar world. While the couple's decision to step down from their royal roles was seen as a personal one, many were quick to point to the intense media pressure surrounding Meghan's motherhood. The overwhelming media coverage of her pregnancy, her choices, and her parenting style made it difficult for Meghan to truly enjoy the experience of becoming a mother. As time went on, Meghan and Harry welcomed their second child, Lilibet Diana, in June 2021. While Archie's birth had been met with typical royal fanfare, Lilibet's arrival was surrounded by a much quieter, more intimate affair. Yet, as with Archie, the birth of their daughter was filled with excitement and emotion. Meghan had once again stepped into the role of mother, but this time, the couple was living a much more private life. Still, the pressure of public expectations loomed large. But what many didn't know at the time, and what was now being revealed, was that both of these pregnancies, both of these children, were part of a narrative Meghan had carefully constructed. The truth, as it turns out, was far different from the story the couple had allowed the world to believe. For years, the world saw Meghan as a woman who had overcome the hardships of a high-profile pregnancy, a woman who had dealt with the stress and strains of public life while nurturing a growing family. Yet, hidden beneath the surface, Meghan had been living with a deeply personal and private health struggle that she had kept out of the spotlight. It was a secret that had never been shared with the public until the medical records were leaked. The records confirmed that Meghan's medical condition was not just an incidental issue. It was a significant factor in her ability to carry a pregnancy to term. The condition, which had affected her fertility, was one that she had been diagnosed with long before she met Harry. It wasn't something that had developed overnight. It was part of her life story, part of the journey she had walked silently and alone. The condition had made it impossible for Meghan to carry children, a fact that had remained hidden from the public eye for years. So, how did this fit into the narrative the world had been told? How had Meghan's pregnancies, the births of Archie and Lilibet, come to be portrayed as a symbol of royal joy, if they were shrouded in such secrecy? The answer, as it began to unfold in the wake of the leak, was both complex and deeply emotional. The records suggested that Meghan, despite her public role as a mother, had never been able to experience pregnancy in the way most women do. She had faced immense challenges with her fertility, challenges that the world had never known about. For Meghan, the pressure of living up to the ideal of motherhood, of being the perfect royal mother, the caring wife, the selfless humanitarian, had often felt overwhelming. Behind her carefully curated image, she had been battling the emotional toll of fertility struggles, all while trying to navigate a life that demanded perfection at every turn. The leaked records painted a picture of a woman who had been living with an invisible burden. Meghan's experience with motherhood, from the moment she discovered she was pregnant to the birth of her children, had been marked not by joy alone, but by the weight of secrecy. She had faced challenges that many women could relate to, but had kept them hidden, not out of shame, but out of necessity. She had to protect herself, her family, and her image. And now, with the leak of her medical records, the world was being forced to reckon with the truth. The questions were inevitable. How had Meghan's medical condition affected her relationship with Harry? How had the couple navigated the complexities of parenthood with such a deeply personal struggle in the background? And what did this new revelation mean for their image as a modern royal family? For Meghan, motherhood had always been a deeply personal journey, but it was one that had been shaped by the weight of public expectation. The leak had torn down the walls of that privacy, forcing her to confront a truth that had remained locked away for years. When the medical records were leaked, the world was given an intimate look into Meghan Markle's life, one that had been hidden for years. But what was most shocking wasn't just the act of leaking private documents. It was the revelation within those documents. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, had been living with a medical condition that prevented her from carrying children. It was a truth that shattered the public's perception of her journey to motherhood. But what was this condition, and how did it affect her life in ways that no one could have imagined? The condition, known as Asherman syndrome, was a diagnosis that Meghan had kept hidden from the world. It is a rare condition in which the uterine lining is damaged, typically as a result of surgery or infection, leading to scarring that can interfere with a woman's ability to conceive or carry a pregnancy to term. For Meghan, the condition was a life-altering challenge, one that impacted her most personal desires, the hope of having children with her partner, Prince Harry. Yet, it was a reality she had faced silently for years, never revealing the true scope of her struggle to the public. Asherman syndrome is not a condition that most people are familiar with, but for those who suffer from it, it can be a source of deep emotional pain and uncertainty. The physical toll can be immense, but the emotional impact is often far more overwhelming. For a woman like Meghan Markle, who had already faced intense scrutiny in her public life, the idea of revealing such a personal struggle was unthinkable. Yet, the leak forced this hidden part of her story into the open. Suddenly, the carefully constructed narrative of a fairy tale pregnancy and royal motherhood was called into question. Doctors and experts who examined Meghan's medical records after the leak confirmed the diagnosis of Asherman syndrome. The condition explained much of what had seemed mysterious about Meghan's pregnancies. Despite her public image as a devoted mother, the truth was that Meghan had faced extreme difficulty in carrying both of her children to term. The condition had made it incredibly challenging for her body to support a pregnancy, and it had undoubtedly added a level of emotional strain that no one could have fully understood until now. But the question that lingered in the minds of many was this: how had Meghan navigated this struggle in such a public arena? How had she managed to create the image of a glowing, happy mother while secretly battling a medical condition that would have tested even the strongest individuals? The answer, it seemed, lay in the strength and resilience that Meghan had developed over the years. The woman who had become a global icon for women's empowerment, charity work, and social justice had also been quietly fighting a battle with her own body. But Meghan had not allowed her condition to define her. Instead, she worked tirelessly to maintain the image of a perfect mother, a role that would have been impossible to sustain had the public known the truth about her health struggles. In interviews, Meghan had always expressed a deep love for motherhood and a desire to give Archie and Lilibet the best possible life. She had spoken with emotion about her joy at becoming a mother, but the truth was that those moments were often clouded by uncertainty. The pressure of keeping her fertility struggles hidden weighed heavily on Meghan, even as she juggled royal duties, media expectations, and a growing family. She had spoken about the challenges of adjusting to the demands of royal life. But what had remained unsaid was the emotional and physical toll of her condition, which made every moment of her pregnancy fraught with anxiety. For Meghan, the decision to keep her medical condition a secret was not one that came easily. It was a personal choice, made out of a desire to protect her family and her privacy. But as the leak made clear, Meghan's privacy was no longer hers to control. What had been her deepest secret, the most intimate part of her experience with motherhood, was now exposed for the world to see. The leak not only exposed her medical condition, but also forced the public to reconsider everything they thought they knew about her family life. Asherman syndrome, while rare, is a condition that affects a significant number of women worldwide. Yet, despite its prevalence, it is often not discussed openly, leaving many women to suffer in silence. Meghan's decision to keep her condition private may have been born from a desire to protect herself, but it also highlighted the broader cultural stigma surrounding women's health issues, particularly when it comes to fertility and pregnancy. For Meghan, a woman who had built a career on advocating for social justice and women's rights, the need to remain silent about something so personal was a bitter irony. But now, as the leak unfolded, experts were beginning to weigh in on the implications of Meghan's diagnosis. What did this mean for her pregnancies? How had she managed to carry both Archie and Lilibet, given the challenges posed by her condition? Doctors speculated that Meghan's pregnancies may have been assisted by medical interventions, such as in vitro fertilization, IVF, or the use of a surrogate. While there was no definitive proof of these speculations, the possibility was enough to spark intense debate in the media. If Meghan had used IVF or a surrogate to have her children, what did that mean for her public image? Would the revelation that Meghan had not carried her children lead to a loss of trust with her supporters? Or would the public rally behind her, understanding the immense challenges she had faced? As more details emerged, the media frenzy grew. The question of whether Meghan had carried her children herself or used medical assistance became one of the central talking points. Yet, amid the speculation, there was one undeniable truth that stood out. Meghan had endured far more than most people could ever imagine. She had fought not only against the pressures of royal life, but also against the limitations of her own body. Meghan's condition was no longer just a personal matter. It had become a global story. As her medical records continued to be analyzed, experts were drawing connections between her fertility struggles and the challenges of being in the public eye. Meghan had always been a symbol of strength, but the leak revealed just how much strength she had needed to summon in order to navigate the impossible demands of royal life while quietly facing her own health battles. From the very beginning, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's relationship captured the world's imagination. It was a story of love breaking barriers, the British royal family welcoming an American actress, a divorcee, and a woman of mixed heritage into its centuries-old institution. Their romance was painted as modern, refreshing, and revolutionary. When Harry introduced Meghan to the world, it felt like a new era for the monarchy. Yet behind the smiles, public appearances, and carefully curated images, their relationship was quietly being tested in ways few could have imagined. And with the revelation of Meghan's medical condition, the cracks in their love story were brought sharply into focus. Harry was always seen as the rebel prince. His decision to marry Meghan was, in many ways, a bold declaration of independence from tradition. But what many overlooked at the time was the enormous pressure placed on both of them. Not just by the royal family, but also by the media and public opinion. Their marriage became a lightning rod for debates about race, class, and the role of the monarchy in a changing world. For Meghan, this was overwhelming enough. Now, add the weight of a private medical condition that directly impacted her ability to fulfill what many saw as a key expectation of royal women, producing heirs. From the outside, their marriage seemed idyllic. The royal wedding in 2018 was a grand spectacle, a blend of royal tradition and Meghan's own modern touches. The image of Meghan walking down the aisle, stunning in her white gown, was etched into global memory. But marriage is never just about the big moments. It's about the quiet, private ones. For Harry and Meghan, those private moments included conversations about children, legacy, and the immense responsibility of raising the next generation of royals. When Archie was born in 2019, the joy was immense. For Harry, it was the fulfillment of a dream he had carried since childhood. For Meghan, it was a moment of triumph, a declaration that she could indeed play the role of wife and mother in the royal family. Yet, the leaked records revealed a more complicated story. Meghan's medical condition would have made carrying Archie herself nearly impossible. This raised uncomfortable questions not just for Meghan, but also for Harry. Had he always known? Was this a secret the two had shared privately, choosing together to keep it hidden from the world? Or had he too been caught off guard by the public narrative? Their relationship was already under strain from relentless media attacks. Meghan's every move was criticized, her every word dissected. The British tabloids hounded her relentlessly, often drawing unflattering comparisons between her and Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Harry, who had grown up watching his mother, Princess Diana, be destroyed by similar scrutiny, was deeply protective. He vowed never to let Meghan endure what Diana had suffered. But the pressures of maintaining their image as parents and partners in the public eye added another layer of stress to their marriage. When the medical records came to light, those stresses multiplied. If Meghan could not carry children, then how did Archie and Lilibet come into the world? Was surrogacy involved? Did they turn to advanced medical technologies? These questions weren't just whispered in private circles. They were shouted from newspaper headlines, debated on television panels, and dissected endlessly online. And every time Meghan's name trended, Harry was dragged into the conversation. For a couple who had chosen to leave royal duties behind to pursue a quieter life, this was the very opposite of what they had hoped for. Inside their relationship, the impact must have been profound. For any couple, fertility struggles can test love in ways few outsiders can understand. It forces painful conversations about expectations, sacrifice, and the future. For Meghan and Harry, those conversations were layered with the added pressure of being global figures. Their relationship was not just personal, it was symbolic. Every choice they made was judged as either a betrayal of tradition or a bold act of independence. And now, with Meghan's condition exposed, their relationship was being judged anew. Harry's love for Meghan had always seemed unshakable. He had stood by her through media storms, family feuds, and public criticism. Yet, the leak challenged that image of unity. Would Harry continue to stand by Meghan as the truth spread? Would the revelation make him question aspects of their life together? Or would it only deepen his resolve to protect her, no matter the cost? Public speculation ran wild. Some commentators suggested Harry must have known about Meghan's condition from the start and had chosen to protect her privacy. Others speculated that he may not have fully understood the extent of her struggles until much later. Whatever the truth, the leak placed their relationship under a new kind of scrutiny, not just as royals, but as husband and wife. Marriage, at its core, is built on trust. For Meghan and Harry, trust had always been the foundation of their partnership. They trusted each other against the world. But the exposure of Meghan's medical records threatened that foundation, not because of betrayal between them, but because of the relentless intrusion of outsiders into their most private matters. For Harry, who had always resented the press for destroying his mother's life, this intrusion was a devastating reminder that history might be repeating itself. The spotlight on Meghan and Harry's relationship only grew brighter as the leak continued to dominate headlines. Analysts dissected every photograph of them together, searching for signs of strain or unity. Every public statement was weighed for hidden meaning. Were they still united? Or were they crumbling under the pressure? The world wanted answers, but the truth was theirs alone to know. What was undeniable, however, was that Meghan and Harry's love story had reached a crossroads. The leak had pulled back the curtain on their most private struggle, forcing them to confront not just the reality of Meghan's condition, but also the harsh reality of life lived in the spotlight. Whether their relationship would survive this new trial remained to be seen. What was certain was that the world would be watching, just as it had from the very beginning. When the medical records about Meghan Markle's condition were leaked, the world wasn't the only one left reeling. The royal family, with its centuries-old traditions and tightly held secrets, was forced into a difficult position. The Sussexes had already distanced themselves from their royal roles by stepping down as senior members of the family, but they were still inextricably tied to the monarchy. The leak of Meghan's medical condition, coupled with the speculation surrounding Archie and Lilibet's births, left the royals with a dilemma. How would they respond to such a deeply personal and public revelation? The first reaction came from the palace press office, a quick but carefully measured statement that reiterated the family's commitment to privacy. They expressed concern for Meghan's well-being, as they always did when a member of the royal family was at the center of controversy. But the real response, the one that mattered most, was not in the statement. It was in the silence that followed. Behind closed doors, the royal family was grappling with the fallout from the leak. King Charles, now the reigning monarch, had already faced considerable challenges in his own reign, from the fallout of his past with Princess Diana to the public's ever-watchful gaze on his actions. The last thing he needed was another scandal involving his son and daughter-in-law. But the situation was complicated. Meghan and Harry were no longer just royal family members. They were global celebrities, whose every move affected the monarchy's image. Their decisions had repercussions far beyond the gates of Buckingham Palace. The first to be affected by the leak was, unsurprisingly, Prince William and Catherine, the Prince and Princess of Wales. William, who had always taken his royal duties seriously, found himself at the center of a controversy that had little to do with him, but had everything to do with the family image. His relationship with Harry had already been strained before the leak, and now, with the world questioning the legitimacy of the Sussex's family story, the tension between the brothers reached new heights. William, who had long been protective of the monarchy's reputation, was caught in an uncomfortable spot. Meghan's revelations were not just about her health. They were about how the monarchy would be perceived moving forward. As the heir apparent, William understood the weight of the royal family's image. Every scandal, every controversy, reflected back on the institution. The royals were expected to maintain an image of dignity, of stoicism, of perfection, and anything that deviated from that would be scrutinized mercilessly. For Catherine, the situation was equally challenging. As the future queen consort, her every move was under the microscope. The media, which had once lauded her as the epitome of royal grace, now found themselves comparing her to Meghan, who had become a lightning rod for both admiration and criticism. Catherine's role had always been one of stability, a steady presence who represented the monarchy's traditional values. But now, the world was questioning the very foundation of what it meant to be a royal mother, a wife, and a future queen. In the wake of the leak, Catherine's response was a carefully constructed one. She expressed her support for Meghan in public, claiming that the royal family stood by her. But behind closed doors, the dynamics within the family were far from smooth. How could they reconcile the public image of the family with the messy, complicated reality that Meghan's medical condition had exposed? The royal family's carefully maintained privacy had been shattered, and in its place was an uncomfortable, looming question. Would this scandal unravel the very fabric of the monarchy itself? While William and Catherine may have been silently grappling with their own feelings of unease, it was Harry's father, King Charles, who found himself in the most delicate position. As monarch, Charles had the responsibility to ensure the royal family's public image remained intact. But as a father, his first instinct would likely have been to protect his son, regardless of the circumstances. How could he reconcile these two roles, the public duty of the king with the personal duty of a father? Charles's reaction, as expected, was measured. In the wake of the leak, he took a brief moment to publicly express concern for Meghan's well-being, echoing the palace's commitment to privacy. But what did that truly mean? The king had been through his own share of scandal and public scrutiny, and he knew the impact that such revelations could have on the royal family. His response, however, was less about public support for Meghan and more about damage control. He understood that the monarchy was at a crossroads, and this leak only intensified the pressure on an already struggling institution. As the weeks passed, the silence from the royal family grew louder. No one spoke publicly about the specifics of Meghan's condition. There were no statements from Buckingham Palace that addressed the leak directly, only vague references to privacy and respect. Yet, behind the scenes, it was clear that the royal family was discussing the situation at length. The impact of Meghan's medical revelation would go beyond her personal life. It would affect the monarchy's future. Charles, William, and Catherine were all keenly aware of the perception of the monarchy's role in the modern world. Their public images had already been put to the test in the past, and now, with this latest controversy involving Meghan's health and the legitimacy of her children, the monarchy's standing was at risk once again. How could they move forward without addressing the elephant in the room? The situation only grew more complicated as the press continued to speculate about the potential for surrogacy or IVF in Meghan's pregnancies. The family's silence left room for the media to fill in the gaps, and soon the question was not just about Meghan's condition, but about the very nature of the royal family itself. What did this say about the monarchy's ability to adapt to modern times? How could they continue to present themselves as the epitome of British tradition when their very foundation was being questioned? By the time the dust had settled, the royal family had yet to issue a direct statement acknowledging the true implications of the leak. There was no apology, no admission, no public reckoning with the fact that one of its most beloved members had lived with a medical condition that fundamentally affected her life and her role in the family. Instead, the monarchy chose to maintain its usual stance, a stance of stoic silence, allowing the public to speculate, to gossip, and to draw their own conclusions. But the impact of the leak was far-reaching. The royal family was left grappling with a narrative that was no longer in their control. And while Charles, William, and Catherine may have tried to maintain the royal family's pristine image, the truth had already leaked out. In the end, the royal family would never be quite the same again. Not after this revelation, not after this breach of privacy, and not after the public had learned more about Meghan Markle's journey than they ever expected to know. The leak of Meghan Markle's medical records sent shockwaves through the royal family, but its ripples spread far beyond Buckingham Palace. For the millions who had followed Meghan's journey from the moment she stepped into the royal spotlight, this new revelation added another layer of complexity to their understanding of the woman they thought they knew. Public perception is a powerful thing. Meghan, who had long been a polarizing figure, suddenly found herself at the center of a storm that was more than just about royal duties and tabloids. It was about her health, her motherhood, and the carefully crafted narrative that had followed her since her marriage to Prince Harry. The world had admired Meghan for her grace, her work ethic, and her role in modernizing the monarchy. She was seen as a beacon for women's empowerment, a former actress who defied the odds and stepped into a world that was not built for people like her. But now, the narrative surrounding her was fractured. The leak revealed a deeply personal struggle, a condition that had defined her path to motherhood in ways the public could never have known. For Meghan, who had always spoken openly about her journey with the press, this was a moment of vulnerability she had never anticipated. The emotional toll was evident as the public processed the news, grappling with the dissonance between the Meghan they had seen in public and the Meghan now exposed by the leak. At the heart of the public's reaction was the question of authenticity. Meghan's supporters had always rallied behind her, lauding her as a trailblazer, a woman who was unapologetically herself. But this new revelation challenged that image. Some asked, how could someone who had projected such confidence and grace through her pregnancies possibly be hiding such an intimate and challenging medical condition? Was it all just a facade? And for her critics, the leak only added fuel to the fire. The skeptics who had already questioned Meghan's sincerity now had something to latch onto, something that seemed to confirm their suspicions. The divide in public perception grew wider. For Meghan's supporters, the leak was a betrayal. They saw it as an invasion of her privacy, a personal breach that exposed the raw, human side of a woman who had always fought for privacy and dignity. The press, which had long been a source of criticism for Meghan, was once again at the center of the storm. Many of her fans took to social media to defend her, calling for a renewed sense of empathy and understanding. Why should she have to share such personal details? They asked. Isn't the relentless scrutiny enough? But for those who had long been skeptical of Meghan's role in the royal family, the leak only reinforced their belief that she was not being entirely forthcoming with the public. It gave them ammunition to continue their narratives of deceit, manipulation, and control. The whispers of surrogacy and manipulating the royal narrative grew louder as people pored over the details of the leak. Some even speculated that Meghan's public image, carefully curated, charming, and seemingly flawless, was nothing more than a well-executed performance, designed to deceive the world in S. The media played a crucial role in shaping these perceptions. News outlets pounced on the story, dissecting every angle and spinning the facts to fit their editorial lines. The tabloids, which had long been accused of targeting Meghan, were now given fresh fodder. Their headlines were relentless, mixing sensationalism with fact in a way that left little room for nuance. For Meghan, the constant barrage of speculation must have been unbearable. After years of being painted as the villain in the royal family story, this new chapter added yet another layer to her public persona, one that was perhaps even more complicated than before. The scrutiny didn't just stop at her medical condition. It spread to her motherhood and her relationship with Harry. How would the public now view their children? Was Archie, the firstborn, really their biological son, or was he another piece of the puzzle that didn't quite fit? The media's focus shifted to the legitimacy of Meghan and Harry's family. The once innocent joy of their children's births was now clouded by the questions surrounding their creation. Did the royal family, and by extension, the world, have the right to know about the origins of Archie and Lilibet? The questions seemed endless. Amid the debate, Meghan's emotional strength began to surface more than ever before. In interviews and public appearances, she continued to advocate for the things she believed in. Her voice became louder, more resolute, as she fought to reclaim the narrative that had been taken from her. She refused to let the leak define her, despite the fact that her privacy had been ripped away. She used this moment not just to protect her family, but to speak up for all women who were silenced by societal expectations. But could the public ever truly reconcile the image they had of Meghan with the woman revealed by the leak? Could they see her as both the figure of empowerment and the private woman struggling with a hidden health battle? It seemed that no matter what Meghan did or said, the public would continue to scrutinize her every move, her every word. Some would cheer her on, while others would continue to question her motives, her authenticity, and the true nature of her family's story. The public's perception of Meghan Markle would never be the same again. The leak had peeled back the layers of her life in a way that could never be undone. It had exposed her vulnerabilities, and for some, it had shattered the carefully constructed image of the perfect royal mother. But for others, it added a new layer of empathy and understanding to the woman who had been so fiercely criticized. The reality of Meghan's health struggles forced people to reckon with the idea that even public figures, even royals, were human, deeply human, and that their lives were far more complex than the headlines allowed. In the end, public perception is a fickle thing. What the world thinks today may not be what it believes tomorrow. But one thing was certain. The leak of Meghan's medical records had forever altered how she would be viewed by the public. Whether the world would come to embrace her story, or whether the cracks in her image would become too wide to repair, remained to be seen. If the leak of Meghan Markle's medical records shocked the world, it devastated Prince Harry. For him, the story was not just another round of tabloid headlines. It wasn't simply a scandal or a controversy. It was an assault on the very heart of his family, a violation of the privacy he had fought so hard to protect. Harry's response to the leak became one of the most closely watched reactions, not just because he was Meghan's husband, but because his entire life had been defined by the tension between the royal family, the media, and his own search for truth. From childhood, Harry's relationship with the press had been turbulent. He grew up watching his mother, Princess Diana, hounded by photographers until the very night of her death. For him, the lesson was clear: the media could destroy lives. That trauma stayed with him, shaping the way he viewed every headline, every camera flash, every story that centered on him and the people he loved. When he met Meghan, he vowed never to let history repeat itself. He would do whatever it took to protect her from the same fate his mother endured. So when the leak of Meghan's medical records surfaced, Harry's first instinct was rage. Those close to him described him as shaken, distraught, but also fiercely protective. He knew that Meghan's medical condition was not just another detail for the press to pick apart. It was the most personal aspect of her life, something that should have been private, sacred. The leak felt like a betrayal of the highest order. A reminder that no matter how far he and Meghan had gone to escape royal duties and forge their own path, the shadows of intrusion and exposure would always follow them. At first, Harry stayed silent. That silence was deafening. Commentators speculated endlessly about what he might say, what he might do. Would he release a statement condemning the press? Would he stand beside Meghan in a show of unity? Would he retreat, choosing to shield his family by refusing to engage at all? Every possibility was dissected in real time, as the world waited for his response. When Harry finally did speak, it wasn't through palace channels or carefully worded press releases. True to his nature, his words were raw, emotional, and unfiltered. He condemned the leak as a violation of basic human dignity. He reminded the world that behind the headlines was a woman, his wife, who had been subjected to endless scrutiny and judgment. He framed the leak not just as an attack on Meghan, but as part of a larger problem: the insatiable hunger for scandal, the willingness to invade privacy for profit, and the disregard for the human beings at the center of these stories. But even as Harry's words resonated, there was an undercurrent of vulnerability. For all his anger, For all his determination to shield Meghan, the leak forced him into a difficult position. Questions began to swirl, not just about Meghan, but about him too. Did he know about her condition before they married? Had he been complicit in presenting a narrative that wasn't entirely true? For a man who had built his public identity on honesty, compassion, and authenticity, those questions were painful. And though he refused to answer them directly, his silence only fueled speculation. Behind closed doors, the impact on Harry must have been profound. His relationship with Meghan had always been about partnership, two people against the world. Now, that bond was being tested in ways neither of them could have predicted. The pressure from the public, from the press, and even from the royal family was immense. Every move they made, every word they spoke, was under a microscope. And Harry, more than anyone, understood the cost of that scrutiny. In private conversations, insiders suggested Harry struggled with feelings of helplessness. He had left the royal family, in part, to protect Meghan from this very kind of exposure. Yet here they were, once again at the center of a media firestorm. He could shield her from palace politics. He could move her away from the relentless grind of royal duties. But he couldn't stop the leak of her medical records. For Harry, that realization was crushing. Yet, if the leak tested Harry's resilience, it also revealed his unshakable loyalty. Those who expected him to distance himself from Meghan, to create space between himself and the controversy, were proven wrong. Instead, Harry doubled down. His words, his actions, and his demeanor all pointed to one truth. He would stand by Meghan, no matter what. In interviews, he emphasized their unity, describing Meghan not just as his wife, but as his partner in everything. His public displays of support sent a clear message. The world could question, the media could speculate, but their bond remained unbroken. Of course, his support didn't silence the critics. In fact, it emboldened them. For every supporter who praised Harry's loyalty, there was a critic who accused him of being blind, manipulated, or naive. They claimed he had sacrificed his royal heritage, his family ties, and his reputation for a woman who had deceived the public. Those accusations hurt, not just because they questioned his judgment, but because they attacked the very foundation of his marriage. Still, Harry refused to back down. He had made his choice long ago, and this leak would not change it. The strain on his relationship with the royal family, however, was undeniable. Harry had already endured years of tension with his father and brother. The leak only made matters worse. For William and Charles, Harry's response, emotional, defiant, uncompromising, was another example of what they saw as his impulsiveness. For Harry, their silence was unforgivable. In his eyes, their failure to defend Meghan publicly was a betrayal, a reminder of how little the institution valued her humanity. The rift that had been growing for years widened further, perhaps irreparably. For the public, Harry's response became a focal point of debate. Was he a devoted husband, standing by his wife in the face of impossible pressure? Or was he a prince who had lost his way, blinded by love and unable to see the bigger picture? The answers depended on who you asked, but one thing was clear: Harry's response mattered. It shaped how the world viewed the leak, how Meghan was perceived, and how the story of the Sussexes would continue to unfold. In the end, Harry's reaction to the leak wasn't just about Meghan's medical condition. It was about his lifelong battle with the press, his determination to protect the people he loved, and his struggle to reconcile his role as a husband with his place in the royal family. It was about love, loyalty, and the cost of living a life in the spotlight. And though the leak had exposed one of Meghan's deepest secrets, it had also revealed something else: the depth of Harry's commitment to her, and the lengths he would go to defend the family they had built together. From the outside, Meghan Markle's life seemed like a fairy tale. She had gone from Hollywood actress to British royal, married Prince Harry, and built a family that seemed poised to redefine the monarchy for a modern era. But behind the glitzy headlines, there were the quiet, personal battles that Meghan faced every day. Celebrity, as glamorous as it appeared, brought with it a suffocating weight, and motherhood only added layers of complexity to her already demanding life. For Meghan, parenthood had always been a balancing act, one that required navigating the expectations of the royal family, the media, and the public, all while managing the intense personal pressures of her medical condition and health struggles. When Meghan and Harry welcomed their first child, Archie, the world's eyes were on them. The birth of a royal heir was always a momentous occasion, but for Meghan, it was the culmination of years of personal dreams and challenges. Meghan had openly spoken about the joys and difficulties of motherhood in the spotlight. She'd expressed the overwhelming love she felt for her son, but the pressure that came with that love was equally intense. As a royal mother, Meghan was not just a parent. She was a symbol. Every milestone in Archie's life, from his first steps to his first words, was broadcast to the world. Every photograph, every interview, every appearance was dissected for clues about her parenting style and her role in the royal family. But as much as Meghan cherished her role as a mother, it was also a burden. The birth of Archie was not the beginning of a quiet family life, as she may have hoped. Instead, it marked the beginning of a new round of intense scrutiny, one that would only increase as time went on. For a woman who had always valued her privacy, the idea of constantly being watched, of every detail of her personal life being subject to public opinion, was suffocating. The tabloids were relentless, constantly trying to catch a glimpse of Meghan and Harry in their most private moments. There was no reprieve, no safe space for the young family to enjoy the first few years of their child's life. The pressure on Meghan only intensified as she experienced the realities of motherhood with her medical condition. Asherman's syndrome, the condition that prevented her from carrying a pregnancy to term, was a silent companion in her journey. Even as she smiled for the cameras, carried out her royal duties, and embraced her role as a mother, there were days when the weight of her health struggles took its toll. The constant strain of living under a microscope, while also managing a private health condition that made her feel vulnerable, was exhausting. It wasn't just the physical pressure, it was the emotional one as well. Meghan had always been an open book to some extent, speaking candidly about mental health, personal struggles, and the challenges she faced as a woman of color in the royal family. But there were certain aspects of her life, her fertility struggles, her health issues, her deepest fears, that she kept locked away. It was a decision made out of necessity, not just to protect her privacy, but to preserve the family's image. But with the leak of her medical records, that privacy was shattered. Suddenly, her motherhood was under a new kind of scrutiny. The very thing that had been her most private experience, her journey to have children, was now public. The judgment, the questions, and the doubts flooded in. As the pressures mounted, Meghan and Harry made the difficult decision to step away from royal duties and seek a more independent life. The decision was a direct response to the overwhelming pressures they faced, not just from the media, but from the expectations placed on them by the monarchy and the public. The constant scrutiny was too much, and Harry, in particular, was determined to shield Meghan and their family from the relentless exposure. The move to California was seen as a fresh start, a chance to take control of their own narrative. But even in their new life away from royal duties, the pressures of celebrity followed them. The idea of privacy seemed almost unattainable. In California, their lives were still closely followed by the media, but now there was the added layer of personal expectations. Meghan was expected to continue her advocacy work, to be a role model for women, and to continue being the picture of grace and success. Yet, within her, there was a profound sense of isolation. The weight of her condition, coupled with the constant public expectation, made even the most mundane moments of motherhood feel like they were under a microscope. In addition to the pressures from the outside world, Meghan faced the emotional toll of her medical condition. While she had managed to carry Archie, the fear that she might not be able to have another child was always present. As a mother, the idea of being unable to give her children the family she had always dreamed of weighed heavily on her. When she and Harry learned that they were expecting Lilibet, it should have been a time of pure joy. But for Meghan, the fear and uncertainty were constant companions. Could her body handle another pregnancy? Would she be able to keep this baby safe? The emotional roller coaster of parenthood, amplified by the knowledge of her health challenges, added a new layer of complexity to her journey. Throughout it all, Meghan remained steadfast in her public commitment to her family. She continued to champion causes related to women's rights, mental health, and children's welfare. Yet, behind her public advocacy, there was the ever-present challenge of balancing her identity as a royal mother with the reality of her personal struggles. She had to reconcile the image of the perfect royal family with the very real, messy experiences of motherhood, all while managing a medical condition that many never knew existed. The leak of her medical records, while traumatic, did serve to humanize Meghan in the eyes of some. For those who had once criticized her for being distant or disconnected, this revelation created a new layer of empathy. Meghan was no longer just the glamorous duchess or the celebrity in the headlines. She was a woman struggling with her body's limitations, fighting to fulfill her role as a mother while navigating the pressures of fame. In the end, the pressures of celebrity and parenthood took a toll on Meghan in ways that were not visible to the public. The expectations placed on her, both by the monarchy and by the world, were overwhelming. As she continued to raise her children, balancing her personal challenges with her public role, she faced the same question that every mother must confront. How do you be everything to everyone while remaining true to yourself? The role of the media in Meghan Markle's life is impossible to overstate. Since the moment she entered the royal family, her every move has been scrutinized, dissected, and reported on by the press. In many ways, Meghan's story is as much about the media's portrayal of her as it is about her own experiences. The media has been both a platform for her to voice her causes and a relentless critic, willing to invade her privacy at every turn. When her private medical records were leaked, it wasn't just a breach of her personal space. It was the culmination of years of media intrusion, a reflection of the complex relationship between public figures and the press. For Meghan, the media's role in her life was a double-edged sword. On one hand, the press was instrumental in elevating her to global prominence. She was hailed as a modern royal, a woman who brought diversity and new energy to the monarchy. But from the very beginning, the media had been unforgiving. Every moment of Meghan's life, from her courtship with Prince Harry to her every appearance as a new mother, was picked apart, dissected, and critiqued. In many ways, Meghan was a victim of the very system that helped propel her to fame. As a woman of color in an institution historically dominated by white figures, she became a lightning rod for both admiration and criticism. The media coverage surrounding her was often polarizing, feeding into the narratives of those who saw her as a beacon of change and those who viewed her as an outsider unworthy of the royal title. The leak of Meghan's medical records wasn't just an isolated incident. It was the inevitable result of years of media manipulation and exploitation. The press, which had followed Meghan's every move, had long cultivated a toxic atmosphere of speculation. For years, Meghan had been portrayed as a difficult and divisive figure, someone who couldn't fit into the mold of the dutiful royal wife. The narrative surrounding her was always full of contradictions. On one hand, she was seen as an empowered, independent woman who broke the royal mold. On the other, she was depicted as an opportunistic celebrity who used the royal family for personal gain. The press both adored and vilified her, depending on the day and the headlines they were chasing. It's important to understand the media's role not just in creating these narratives, but in sustaining them. From day one, the press attacked Meghan's every decision. Her choice to wear a black dress to her first royal event was scrutinized as a break from tradition. Her outspoken advocacy on issues like women's rights and mental health was seen as controversial, even though those were causes she had championed long before joining the royal family. And of course, there were the infamous moments where Meghan was criticized for things as trivial as her choice of a private jet, which was painted as hypocritical in light of her environmental activism. The constant media coverage was overwhelming, and it painted Meghan as someone who could do no right, no matter her intentions or the complexity of the issues she was trying to address. The leak of her medical records was, in many ways, the press's final act in its long campaign to control Meghan's narrative. By releasing such deeply personal information, the media crossed a line that could not be ignored. It was a violation not just of Meghan's privacy, but of every principle of journalistic ethics that the press claimed to uphold. The details of her medical condition were meant to remain private, yet they were now exposed to the world. The media, which had long been complicit in perpetuating the public's perception of Meghan, now had its hands on a piece of the story that could potentially change everything. For Meghan, it wasn't just about dealing with the invasive nature of the media. It was about confronting the reality that her own narrative had been hijacked in ways she never imagined. the leak was a tipping point. It wasn't just about Meghan's medical records. It was about the larger issue of how the media had treated her and how the press treated women in general. The leaks highlighted the relentless, invasive nature of modern journalism, especially when it came to high-profile figures like Meghan. The press had no qualms about dissecting her every move, spinning stories to fit a narrative that served its own agenda. Even when Meghan and Harry had stepped back from their royal duties to gain more privacy, the media found ways to tear them down. Their request for privacy was seen as a form of rebellion, and that rebellion was met with backlash. The idea that a member of the royal family, especially a couple so beloved by the public, would step away from the duties they were born into was unacceptable to many in the media. This created a feeding frenzy, as outlets scrambled to uncover new dirt and sensationalize their every action. For Meghan, the leak was just the latest in a long string of media betrayals. It wasn't the first time her privacy had been invaded. There had been countless stories in the press that crossed personal boundaries, from the publicizing of her family struggles to the relentless pursuit of her every outfit. But this was different. This wasn't just about her choice of clothing or the people she associated with. It was about her health, her body, and her role as a mother. It was about the very essence of who she was. The leak made it clear that no matter how much she tried to protect her privacy, the media would stop at nothing to uncover it. Meghan's experience with the media highlights the dark side of celebrity culture and the way in which the press often exploits personal struggles for profit. For the public, it can be easy to forget that celebrities, royals, and public figures are human beings with their own vulnerabilities. The press, however, often chooses to ignore this basic fact in favor of sensationalism. The leak of Meghan's medical records was a stark reminder of how far the media is willing to go to maintain its hold on the public's attention. For Meghan, it was an incredibly painful moment, not just because of the betrayal she felt, but because it exposed her to the world in a way that no one should have to experience. In the aftermath of the leak, the media's role became even more evident. The stories that followed focused not just on the facts of the leak, but on the implications it had for Meghan's image. Was she a liar? Had she deceived the world about her pregnancies? Was she using the royal family for her own gain? The media's role in framing these narratives was undeniable. The focus wasn't on the violation of her privacy. It was on the drama, the scandal, and the sensationalism of it all. The press, once again, shifted the narrative to fit their interests, leaving Meghan to pick up the pieces of her shattered privacy. And yet, amid the media's frenzy, Meghan's voice remained. She continued to speak out, not just about the leak, but about the broader issue of privacy, respect, and the press's treatment of women. Her stance was clear. The media had gone too far. She would no longer allow herself to be a passive participant in a narrative controlled by the press. Instead, she would fight for the truth, even if it meant confronting the very institutions that had built her public persona. When news of Meghan Markle's medical condition broke and the world learned that she had faced severe fertility challenges, it wasn't just Meghan's life that was exposed to scrutiny. The identities of her children, Archie and Lilibet, were brought into the conversation as well. For the young children of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, the leaking of such personal information sparked a new wave of questions about their legitimacy and the very nature of their existence. Public opinion, which had once celebrated Archie and Lilibet as the new faces of modern royalty, now turned suspicious, speculative, and invasive. The issue of parenthood and the birth of royal children has always been a subject of great interest. The British royal family, a symbol of tradition and history, has often been scrutinized for its handling of matters like succession, titles, and inheritance. In this context, the birth of Harry and Meghan's children was highly anticipated. The world watched closely as the Sussexes welcomed Archie in 2019 and Lilibet in 2021, two children who were expected to carry the royal legacy into the future. But the revelation of Meghan's medical condition threw the narrative surrounding the Sussexes' children into a whirlwind of controversy. Meghan had made it clear in the past that she and Harry were excited about expanding their family, and that they wanted to provide their children with a life free from the intense scrutiny that often accompanies royal offspring. Yet, when the public learned that Meghan was medically unable to carry a pregnancy to term, the nature of Archie and Lilibet's births came under intense speculation. The questions multiplied. How had they come into the world? Was there something about their conception or birth that had been kept from the public? This uncertainty stirred up one of the most deeply held fears of public figures with complicated family dynamics: the questioning of legitimacy. The media frenzy surrounding the leak didn't just target Meghan's struggles with fertility, it also began to dissect the very core of her children's identities. Rumors spread like wildfire. Were Archie and Lilibet the biological children of Meghan and Harry? Had they used a surrogate? Was this an act of deception, or was it simply the reality of modern parenting that some weren't ready to accept? For a family that had been so vocal about their desire to maintain privacy, these questions hit hard. The leak made the personal intensely public. While the royal family had always been subject to a certain level of public scrutiny, the Sussexes were different. Meghan and Harry had tried to carve out a space where they could live as independent individuals, outside the strict expectations of royal life. Their children, Archie and Lilibet, were meant to be shielded from the media circus that had surrounded their parents. Yet now, the leak thrust them into the spotlight in a way that no child should ever have to experience. For Archie, the repercussions were particularly significant. As the firstborn son of Prince Harry, he was already destined to live a life under the public's watchful eye. But after the leak, the scrutiny increased exponentially. The once innocent joy of welcoming a new royal child was now overshadowed by questions about his biological origins. People began to wonder whether his birth had been part of a calculated plan, a necessary step in creating the ideal royal narrative for Harry and Meghan. Some questioned whether Archie's birth had been managed with medical assistance, even suggesting that a surrogate might have been involved. These invasive assumptions became part of the public discourse, feeding into the media narrative of a family that could not be trusted to tell the truth about its own story. For Lilibet, the impact was perhaps even more profound. As the second child of Harry and Meghan, Lilibet had been born into a media firestorm. Her birth had already been controversial in some circles due to the timing, as the Sussexes were still living in California, far from the royal limelight in the UK. Yet, with the leak of Meghan's condition, Lilibet's arrival became the subject of even more speculation. Could she have been conceived and born naturally, as her brother Archie had been? Or was there a deeper, hidden truth that no one had been privy to? The thought that the world was questioning the legitimacy of these children who were both deeply loved by their parents and had done nothing to deserve such attention, was a bitter pill for Meghan and Harry to swallow. It was not just an attack on their personal lives, but an attack on their children's futures. What would this mean for their upbringing? Would they grow up in a world where their very existence was constantly scrutinized, where questions of their biological origins would follow them throughout their lives? One of the most challenging aspects of this situation was the fact that Meghan and Harry had always been deeply protective of their children's privacy. From the moment Archie was born, the couple had taken extraordinary steps to shield him from the press, refusing to allow photographs of him to be published in the tabloids. They made it clear that they wanted to raise their children out of the public eye, giving them as normal a life as possible. But the leak of Meghan's medical condition turned that desire for privacy upside down. It placed their children at the center of a media storm that they had fought so hard to avoid. For Harry, this was particularly difficult. He had spent his entire life under the public microscope, but his children were supposed to be different. He had promised Meghan and himself that their children would not grow up in the same spotlight that had overshadowed his own childhood. But now, with the leak exposing Meghan's struggles with fertility, their children's privacy was forever compromised. The emotional toll on Meghan and Harry was undeniable. As parents, they wanted to protect their children from the very world that had created so many of their own struggles. But with the leak came the realization that their children would always be tied to the media, whether they liked it or not. No matter how hard they tried to shield Archie and Lilibet from the public eye, the media's lens would always find them. Their lives would never be the same again. This deepened the rift between the Sussexes and the royal family. While the monarchy had always been scrutinized for its secrecy and detachment, the royal family had never faced this level of public intrusion. Meghan and Harry's decision to leave the UK and raise their children in California was, in many ways, an attempt to escape this very invasion of privacy. But the leak showed that even in their new home, far from the royal machine, they could not escape the relentless glare of the media spotlight. The future of Archie and Lilibet seemed uncertain. Would they grow up with the same weight of scrutiny that had defined their parents' lives? Would they be free to create their own identities? Or would they be forever bound by the legacy of their parents' decisions and the media frenzy that had followed them since their birth? One thing was clear. The leak had set a dangerous precedent for their future. A future where their privacy, their identities, and their legitimacy would always be up for debate. Prince Harry's relationship with the royal family had always been complicated. As the younger son of Prince Charles and the late Princess Diana, Harry was never destined for the throne. Growing up in the shadow of his older brother, Prince William, Harry often struggled to carve out a meaningful role for himself within the monarchy. However, it wasn't just the weight of being the spare that defined Harry's relationship with his family. His deep desire for independence, his fierce protectiveness of his loved ones, and the trauma of losing his mother in such a public, devastating way shaped much of his life. Harry's decision to step back from royal duties alongside Meghan Markle was not an isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of internal struggle and tension with the monarchy. For many, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's decision to take a step away from royal life was a bold statement of independence. It was an act of defiance, but it was also one driven by the pressures of a life lived under constant media scrutiny, compounded by Harry's own past experiences. In the years leading up to their departure, Harry had watched his family navigate their royal roles while simultaneously witnessing the toll it had taken on his mother, Princess Diana. Her tragic death at the hands of the press, the invasive coverage, and the resulting personal and public turmoil had left an indelible mark on Harry. In Meghan, Harry found someone who understood this pain. She too had been targeted by the media, vilified for simply existing in the public eye, and Harry's decision to protect her from the same fate was his way of breaking free from the patterns of his past. The royal family's reaction to Harry and Meghan's decision to step away was not a simple matter of personal choice. It was a matter of tradition and expectation. For the monarchy, the idea of stepping down from royal duties was almost unheard of. Members of the royal family were expected to serve the crown for life, to live their roles as public figures, and uphold the traditions that had existed for generations. Harry's departure from these duties, while presented as a move to preserve his family's privacy, was also seen by some as a rejection of the royal institution itself. For a family that prided itself on stability and continuity, Harry's decision represented a shift, one that the royal family could neither ignore nor easily accept. Prince Charles, as Harry's father and the heir to the throne, was particularly affected by this break from royal tradition. On one hand, Charles understood the pressure his sons had faced, especially in light of the trauma surrounding Diana's death. He had always been deeply affected by the loss of his first wife, and perhaps in his own way, he understood why Harry felt the need to step away from the limelight. But on the other hand, Charles was a man who valued duty and tradition. For him, the monarchy was a lifelong commitment, and Harry's decision to relinquish his royal duties was a personal and public blow. The relationship between father and son became strained as both tried to navigate the fallout of Harry's decision. Prince William, Harry's older brother, also struggled with this new dynamic. William had always been the heir, the one expected to carry on the legacy of the royal family. Harry, in many ways, had played the role of the spare, offering support and stepping into public duties as needed. But Harry's decision to leave the royal family challenged this established structure. It not only created a rift between Harry and his immediate family, but also forced a reconsideration of how the monarchy would function moving forward. William, who had already expressed his concerns about his brother's choices, found himself facing questions about his own future as the heir to the throne. Despite these tensions, the royal family did their best to put on a united front. Publicly, they expressed their support for Harry and Meghan's decision to move to North America. The Queen, in particular, was known for her desire to maintain the stability of the monarchy, and while she was undoubtedly saddened by Harry and Meghan's departure, she continued to offer her support. Yet, behind closed doors, the fractures were evident. The rift between Harry and his family was impossible to ignore, and it became increasingly clear that the royal family's traditional structure was being tested in ways it had never been before. One of the most challenging aspects of Harry's relationship with his family was the way in which the media had shaped the narrative around him. The press, both in the UK and globally, had always had a keen interest in the younger royal. Harry's rebellious nature, his military service, his high-profile relationships, and his openness about mental health made him a popular figure, but it also made him a target. Over the years, Harry had been portrayed in both positive and negative lights. He had been the fun-loving royal, the bad boy, and later, the passionate advocate for mental health and social justice. But with Meghan, the narrative changed. The couple's decision to step back from royal duties was a pivotal moment in Harry's relationship with the royal family. It marked a turning point where Harry was forced to confront the realities of his position as a royal, as a son, and as a husband. For years, Harry had been fighting for the right to live his life on his own terms, to protect the woman he loved from the same fate that had befallen his mother. But in doing so, he had not only distanced himself from the royal family, but had also exposed himself to the full force of the media's scrutiny. In the aftermath of their decision to step away, Harry and Meghan's relationship with the royal family was never the same. The public divisions became apparent, with Harry expressing frustration at the lack of support from his family, especially after the leak of Meghan's medical records. He felt betrayed by the lack of public backing from the royals, and his bitterness was evident in interviews, where he discussed the emotional toll that living under the media microscope had taken on both him and Meghan. The royal family, on the other hand, was left to pick up the pieces of their carefully constructed public image. Yet despite the tensions, Harry's love and loyalty to his family never fully wavered. In interviews, he spoke about how much he still cared for his father, Prince Charles, and his brother, William, despite the growing rift. He often alluded to the fact that there was still room for reconciliation, but that the path forward would require a shift in how the royal family functioned. For Harry, the issues were not just about the media or public expectations. They were about the future of the monarchy itself. The question remained: could Harry and his family ever reconcile their differences, or had the leak, coupled with their decision to leave, irreparably fractured the relationship? As the months passed, Harry's relationship with the royal family continued to evolve. There were moments of tension, but also moments of hope. His relationship with William remained particularly strained, though both brothers have expressed a desire to rebuild their bond. Whether that will happen, however, remains uncertain. The leaks, the media attention, and the personal challenges faced by Harry and Meghan have made it clear that the path to reconciliation will not be easy. What's certain is that Harry's relationship with the royal family, once defined by duty, tradition, and public expectation, had been forever changed. The fallout from the leak of Meghan Markle's medical records reverberated far beyond the walls of Buckingham Palace. It became not just a scandal, but a global crisis, one that touched on issues of privacy, the role of the media, the institution of the monarchy, and the future of Harry and Meghan's relationship with the world. For Meghan, the leak exposed a deeply personal struggle that had remained hidden for years. But it also exposed the dark underbelly of the royal family's relationship with the press, a system that had thrived on invasion and exploitation. For Meghan and Harry, the leak was more than just a breach of privacy. It was the culmination of everything they had fought to escape. From the very beginning of their relationship, they had been scrutinized, criticized, and attacked by the media. The press had been relentless, tearing apart every aspect of their lives, from their wedding to their children and everything in between. The pressure had been immense, and despite their attempts to shield themselves from it, the media's constant intrusion into their private lives continued to take a toll. The leak of Meghan's medical records, however, marked a turning point. It wasn't just an attack on her health, it was an attack on her very identity. The fact that her condition had been hidden for so long, and then revealed to the world without her consent, was an unprecedented violation. And it wasn't just Meghan who suffered. Harry, too, found himself thrust into the spotlight once again, forced to confront the fallout of his decision to stand by Meghan, a decision that had already cost him his place within the royal family. For the royal family, the fallout was equally significant. The leak had brought the institution's relationship with the media into the public eye in a way that had never been seen before. The monarchy had always maintained a delicate balance with the press, cooperating when necessary, but also drawing clear lines when it came to the privacy of its members. But with the leak of Meghan's medical records, those lines were shattered. It became clear that the relationship between the royals and the press was no longer sustainable. The palace, once seen as a bastion of tradition and stability, now appeared vulnerable, with its members caught between the pressures of modern life and the need to preserve their public image. The media, for its part, doubled down on its coverage. Meghan's personal story was turned into a spectacle, dissected in endless articles, TV segments, and online discussions. Experts weighed in, debating the ethics of the leak, questioning Meghan's decision to keep her condition secret, and speculating about how it would impact her standing within the royal family. It wasn't just Meghan's health that was up for discussion. It was the very nature of her role in the monarchy, her relationship with Harry, and even the legitimacy of her children. The leak had shifted the focus away from the royal family's more traditional functions and put the very personal struggles of one woman at the center of a global conversation. For Harry, the fallout was especially painful. Not only did he have to contend with the emotional and psychological toll of seeing his wife's most intimate struggles exposed, but he also had to deal with the fallout within his own family. The rift between him and his family had deepened, and it became clear that reconciliation would be far from easy. While Harry remained firm in his support for Meghan, he was not immune to the pressures of living in the public eye. The media's portrayal of him as a traitor to the monarchy, someone who had abandoned his royal duties for personal gain, weighed heavily on him. He had made the choice to protect Meghan and their children, but it had come at a great personal cost. In the months following the leak, the relationship between Harry and the royal family seemed to reach a breaking point. While there had been attempts at communication, the wounds ran deep. Harry had long felt like an outsider within the family, but the leak brought those feelings to the surface. His frustration with the lack of public support for Meghan, especially from his father and brother, intensified. For Harry, the palace's inability to fully back Meghan, especially in such a personal matter, only reinforced his belief that he and his family were being treated as second-class royals, sidelined in favor of tradition and duty. The fallout from the leak also impacted Meghan's relationship with her own family. While she had always been close to her mother, Doria Ragland, the public revelation of her medical struggles had put a strain on her relationship with other family members. Meghan's estranged father, Thomas Markle, had already been a constant source of controversy, and his reaction to the leak only added fuel to the fire. He had long been critical of Meghan, and the revelation about her health only gave him more ammunition to attack her publicly. For Meghan, the emotional toll of dealing with her father's public criticisms, coupled with the media's invasion of her privacy, was overwhelming. In the wake of the leak, Meghan was forced to confront not only her personal struggles, but also the broader implications of living in the public eye. She had long fought for privacy, for a life away from the prying eyes of the press, but the leak reminded her that no amount of control could shield her from the invasive nature of the media. The sense of betrayal she felt, knowing that her most intimate details had been exposed, was profound. And yet, she refused to remain silent. She spoke out, not just for herself, but for all the women and men who had suffered in silence, their lives manipulated and controlled by the press. The leak also highlighted the fundamental disconnect between Meghan and the royal family's traditional view of privacy. The royal family, with its long history of carefully controlled public images, had always maintained a strict separation between public and private life. But for Meghan, that line was constantly blurred. She had always been a woman of action, someone who used her platform to speak out on issues that mattered to her. Yet the royal family's reluctance to fully embrace her advocacy, and their failure to publicly defend her, made her feel increasingly isolated. The leak, which exposed not just her medical struggles, but also the very nature of her relationship with the monarchy, was the final straw. As the fallout from the leak continued, the public began to reassess its view of Meghan and Harry. For some, they became martyrs, fighting to maintain their integrity in the face of an unforgiving press. For others, the leak only reinforced the image of Meghan as someone who had manipulated the royal family and the public for her own gain. In either case, the Sussexes had become the focal point of a much larger debate about privacy, power, and the role of the media in shaping public perception. Meghan Markle's life has been shaped by the intense pressures of living in the public eye. From the moment she began her relationship with Prince Harry, her every move was scrutinized. For many, this level of attention was a privilege, a chance to be at the center of global fascination. But for Meghan, the constant media intrusion took a heavy toll on her mental health, and the leaks that followed only made matters worse. The effect of this relentless scrutiny would be profound, affecting her well-being and her sense of self in ways that few could have predicted. Before her marriage to Harry, Meghan was no stranger to the media. As an actress and public figure, she had experienced her fair share of press coverage. But the scale of attention she received as part of the royal family was something altogether different. What had once been occasional interest in her personal life became an all-consuming frenzy, a never-ending wave of paparazzi photos, speculation, and invasive headlines. Every detail of her life, from her fashion choices to her relationships, was examined and critiqued by the press. What had once been a manageable level of media attention had now morphed into something toxic, and Meghan was caught in its crosshairs. In the early days of her relationship with Harry, Meghan seemed poised and confident, handling the media with grace. She had always been open about her beliefs, using her platform to speak out on issues like women's rights, racial justice, and mental health. She was a woman with a clear vision of her place in the world, and she was determined to use her voice for good. But the closer she got to the royal family, the more intense the media scrutiny became. It wasn't just about who she was or what she stood for. It was about every part of her life being laid bare for public consumption. And that, in turn, began to erode her sense of peace. The media's relentless pursuit of Meghan took a heavy toll on her mental health. In interviews, Meghan has spoken candidly about her struggles with depression and anxiety, which were exacerbated by the constant media attention. She described feeling isolated, trapped in a life where her every move was watched and judged. What began as a sense of excitement about joining the royal family quickly turned into a nightmare. The pressure to conform to an idealized version of royal life, coupled with the endless invasion of privacy, left Meghan feeling like she was suffocating. This overwhelming sense of isolation was compounded by the lack of support from those around her. While Meghan and Harry had always been a united front, their decision to step away from royal duties left them both feeling even more alienated. Meghan found herself increasingly distant from her family and the royal institution. She had hoped that the move to California would allow them to escape the press and live a more private life, but the media continued to follow them, casting a shadow over their every move. No matter how hard they tried to protect their children or create a sense of normalcy, the press seemed determined to drag them back into the public eye. As Meghan's mental health began to deteriorate, the pressures of motherhood only added to the strain. Having children, particularly under such intense scrutiny, was never going to be easy. But for Meghan, the fear that her struggles with fertility might be exposed created a new layer of anxiety. She worried about what people would think of her as a mother, as a woman who had faced the emotional and physical toll of her medical condition. The pressure to live up to the expectations of being a perfect, royal mother weighed heavily on her, and it made her feel like she was failing, even when she was doing everything she could to protect her family. In her most vulnerable moments, Meghan turned to Harry for support, but even his presence could not completely shield her from the outside world. Harry, who had grown up in the royal spotlight, understood the toll of public scrutiny all too well. He had watched his mother, Princess Diana, endure the same relentless press attention, and he had seen the emotional toll it took on her. It was that trauma, the memories of his mother's suffering and her untimely death, that motivated Harry to protect Meghan at all costs. Yet, despite his love and support, Meghan's mental health continued to decline. The more they tried to escape the press, the more the media found new ways to invade their lives. By the time the leak of Meghan's medical records occurred, Meghan's mental health had already been severely impacted. The stress, anxiety, and isolation had taken their toll, and the emotional strain was evident. Meghan spoke about how she felt like she was being pushed to the edge, how she felt trapped in a system that offered no way out. The leak, which exposed her medical condition to the world, only made matters worse. It was a final violation, one that Meghan could never have anticipated. For someone who had already been battling the media's unrelenting focus, this was the ultimate betrayal. In the aftermath of the leak, Meghan found herself at a crossroads. Her mental health had reached a breaking point, and it was clear that something had to change. She and Harry had already stepped back from their royal duties, but now they were forced to reconsider how they could continue living in a world where their every move was scrutinized. Meghan, who had once used her platform to advocate for mental health, now had to confront her own struggles. She was no longer just an advocate. She was a woman who had been broken by the very system she had once sought to change. The decision to speak out was a difficult one, but Meghan knew that she couldn't remain silent any longer. She used her voice not just for herself, but for all the people who had suffered in silence. She became an advocate for mental health, speaking out about the importance of seeking help, the need for understanding, and the power of vulnerability. In doing so, she took back control of her narrative, using her pain as a tool for empowerment. Meghan's journey is a testament to the profound impact that the media can have on an individual's mental health. The pressures of living in the public eye are overwhelming, and for someone like Meghan, who had always been open and authentic, the constant scrutiny became a suffocating force. But through it all, Meghan found strength in her vulnerability. She chose to speak out, not just for herself, but for others who had been silenced by their own struggles. And in doing so, she began to heal. The moment Prince Harry learned of the leak regarding Meghan's medical records was nothing short of catastrophic. The news reached him in the midst of a day already burdened with relentless media inquiries and the constant hum of paparazzi outside his California home. Harry, no stranger to pressure, had built a resilience through years of intense public scrutiny, but this revelation struck at the core of his deepest fears. That the life he had tried to protect for Meghan and their family could be exposed in ways that were deeply personal and unforgiving. Harry's first reaction was one of disbelief. The idea that Meghan's most private health information, something she had shared only with her medical professionals, had been leaked to the public felt like an intrusion beyond comprehension. For Harry, this was not just a breach of privacy. It was a deliberate and cruel attack designed to humiliate Meghan and tarnish her public image. Memories of his mother's struggles with invasive media tactics resurfaced with a sharp intensity. Diana had faced relentless press coverage, which had invaded her personal life, her relationships, and ultimately contributed to the tragedy of her final days. Harry knew, with chilling clarity, that history was repeating itself. As the news sank in, Harry's immediate concern was for Meghan. He rushed to her side, finding her grappling with a mixture of shock, grief, and anger. Meghan had always been composed under scrutiny, but the leak had cut deeper than any headline, any rumor, or any social media attack ever could. The intimate nature of the information meant that it could not be dismissed, explained away, or reframed. Harry, seeing Meghan's vulnerability, felt a surge of protectiveness stronger than he had ever experienced before. He vowed, in that instant, to do everything in his power to shield her from the fallout and to fight back against those responsible. The leak ignited a firestorm across the media landscape. Headlines blared in tabloid newspapers, online platforms, and television broadcasts. Allegations, assumptions, and misinformation spread like wildfire. Public opinion was divided. Some expressed sympathy for Meghan, condemning the violation of her privacy, while others seized upon the leak as confirmation of long-running speculation regarding her children, Archie and Lilibet. Harry, acutely aware of the stakes, knew that this was not just a personal battle. It was a war over public perception, legacy, and the very reputation of his family. Amid the media frenzy, the reaction within the royal family itself was complex and fraught with tension. Palace aides, advisors, and senior royals convened in urgent meetings, trying to assess the damage and plan their response. There were whispers of disbelief and concern, and some members were rumored to feel that Harry and Meghan had made choices that left them exposed to attacks they could have otherwise avoided. Others empathized with the couple, recognizing that the leak represented a gross violation of privacy and a direct threat to Meghan's mental and emotional well-being. Harry's personal turmoil was compounded by the public nature of the revelations. Every statement he made, every interview he gave, was dissected for tone, intent, and authenticity. The prince faced a unique challenge. Defending his wife and her privacy while navigating the expectations and protocols of the royal institution. It was a delicate balancing act, one that required both strategic thinking and raw emotional intelligence. Harry knew that a misstep could exacerbate the situation, potentially inviting further criticism and scrutiny. Despite the pressure, Harry acted decisively. Legal avenues were immediately explored, with lawyers preparing to pursue action against any individuals or organizations responsible for the leak. Security protocols were reviewed and tightened, and every effort was made to ensure that Meghan and the children were protected from further intrusion. But Harry's most significant response was emotional and personal. He remained steadfastly by Meghan's side, providing unwavering support, reassurance, and solidarity. The public might see a prince standing tall at ceremonial events, but behind closed doors, Harry became a shield against the storm, a constant presence to remind Meghan that she was not facing the world alone. The broader impact of the leak on the royal family was profound. Discussions within the palace walls revealed fault lines in relationships that had been long hidden beneath public decorum. Some family members expressed frustration at the media's portrayal of Meghan, while others privately acknowledged that Harry and Meghan's efforts to live a more independent life had left them vulnerable to attacks. Debates about how to handle public relations, media strategy, and family support intensified, creating a tense atmosphere within the royal household. For Harry, the leak also prompted a re-evaluation of his role and responsibilities. He recognized that, despite his desire for a more private life, the consequences of living as a royal would continue to follow him and Meghan. He began considering ways to assert control over their narrative, using strategic media engagements, selective interviews, and public statements to clarify the truth and counter misinformation. The couple's commitment to privacy had been tested, and Harry knew that proactive measures were essential to prevent future invasions of their personal lives. The emotional toll on Harry was immense. Seeing Meghan struggle with feelings of violation, anxiety, and grief stirred memories of his own experiences with loss and public scrutiny. He reflected on the trauma of his childhood, the impact of relentless media attention on his mother, and the challenges of navigating a life that was constantly in the public eye. Harry's empathy for Meghan deepened, solidifying a bond that had always been strong but now had been tested under extraordinary circumstances. Public sentiment began to shift as the story developed. Outlets that initially speculated about the implications of Meghan's medical records began to highlight the ethical and legal concerns raised by the leak. Discussions about privacy, consent, and the responsibilities of the press emerged in social commentary, podcasts, and panel discussions. Harry, ever attuned to the broader narrative, recognized that the leak, while devastating, could also serve as a catalyst for important conversations about boundaries, respect, and the treatment of women in public life. The fallout also reached Meghan's allies and supporters, who rallied to defend her publicly. Celebrities, advocates, and members of charitable organizations voiced their outrage at the invasion of privacy, framing the leak as part of a broader pattern of media harassment. Their support provided a layer of validation for Meghan and Harry, reinforcing the idea that their experience was not an isolated incident, but part of a systemic problem that required attention and reform. As the days unfolded, Harry's response demonstrated a combination of courage, resilience, and strategic thinking. He balanced the need to protect Meghan with the imperative to maintain the dignity and responsibilities expected of a royal. He engaged with legal teams, public relations experts, and trusted advisors to craft a response that would defend Meghan without inflaming tensions unnecessarily. Every step he took was calculated to mitigate damage while also honoring the couple's desire for privacy and autonomy. The chapter of Harry's reaction to the leak would become a defining moment in his life and marriage. It highlighted the intense pressures faced by modern royals, the vulnerabilities of private individuals under public scrutiny, and the enduring power of love, loyalty, and partnership in the face of adversity. Harry's unwavering support for Meghan in this crisis demonstrated a commitment that transcended protocol, tradition, and public expectation. It was a statement that, regardless of the media's portrayal, family loyalty and personal integrity would guide his actions. The ripple effects of the leak continued to impact the couple's life in both subtle and overt ways. Social dynamics within the royal family shifted, media narratives evolved, and public conversations about privacy and mental health intensified. Harry, acutely aware of the broader implications, became both protector and advocate, using his voice to defend Meghan while also highlighting the broader issues that the leak had exposed. His response was not only personal, but also deeply symbolic, signaling to the world that the couple would no longer be passive subjects of media scrutiny, but active participants in shaping their own narrative. In the days following the unprecedented leak of Meghan's medical records, it became clear to both Meghan and Harry that remaining silent was no longer an option. The privacy invasion had crossed a line that could not be ignored, and the couple understood that their response would set the tone for not only how the public perceived them, but also how future media violations would be handled. They needed to act decisively, strategically, and with a clarity that had often eluded them in previous crises. Meghan, having endured years of relentless scrutiny, drew on her inner strength and resilience. She had learned, sometimes painfully, how to navigate the pressures of public life while protecting her dignity. Yet this situation was unique. The exposure of her medical history was not simply a rumor, a misleading headline, or a misrepresented quote. It was deeply personal, factual information that had been weaponized against her. The knowledge that her ability to carry children had been broadcast, debated, and analyzed in the public sphere struck at the very core of her sense of self and privacy. It was a raw and vulnerable attack, and Meghan recognized that reclaiming her narrative would be both necessary and empowering. Harry, ever the protector, immediately rallied to Meghan's side. But this time, his approach was measured, strategic, and proactive. He understood that reactive anger or public outbursts could be spun into yet another story of royal discord. Instead, he focused on the power of controlled, deliberate messaging. Together, they began to plan a multi-layered approach to take control of the narrative. Legal action against the perpetrators of the leak, selective media engagement to provide clarity and context, and public statements that emphasize the couple's commitment to truth, privacy, and dignity. One of the first steps was to enlist top legal counsel specializing in privacy and data protection. These experts reviewed the circumstances of the leak, identified the sources and channels through which the records had been disseminated, and formulated a strategy for pursuing accountability. The legal team emphasized not only the personal violations suffered by Meghan, but also the broader implications for privacy rights. Harry and Meghan were acutely aware that their case could set a precedent for protecting individuals, particularly women, against intrusive media practices that had become normalized in the digital age. Parallel to the legal strategy, the couple began to engage with trusted media outlets to present their perspective. Interviews were carefully curated, ensuring that Meghan and Harry could share their truth without further exposing themselves to sensationalism or misrepresentation. Meghan spoke candidly about her experience, addressing the emotional and psychological impact of the leak while highlighting the importance of privacy, respect, and human dignity. Harry, meanwhile, framed the discussion around the systemic nature of media intrusion and the need for accountability, drawing attention to the dangers posed by unchecked reporting and the weaponization of personal information. The couple's approach was not only reactive but also proactive. They began to take control of their public image, sharing moments and stories that conveyed authenticity, transparency, and humanity. Social media posts, public appearances, and charitable engagements were leveraged to communicate directly with supporters and the broader public. Every decision was deliberate: what to share, how to share it, and when to share it. The aim was clear: to replace speculation, gossip, and false narratives with a narrative of truth, resilience, and integrity. This effort to reclaim their story also extended to their closest allies. Friends, colleagues, and supporters were engaged to amplify the message and provide validation. Public figures and advocates spoke out against the leak, highlighting the ethical violations involved and supporting the couple's right to privacy. This coordinated effort created a network of voices that reinforced the legitimacy of Meghan and Harry's response and countered the flood of misinformation. Internally, Harry and Meghan developed a set of guiding principles to navigate the ongoing media storm. First, they committed to honesty without oversharing. Second, they prioritized their emotional well-being and that of their family above all else. Third, They embraced strategic silence in situations where public engagement would only serve to inflame or distract. These principles became the backbone of their approach, providing a sense of control and purpose in a situation that initially seemed uncontrollable. As the narrative began to shift, the couple's efforts started to bear fruit. Public conversations increasingly centered on the ethics of the leak, the importance of privacy rights, and the disproportionate scrutiny faced by women in the public eye. Journalists and commentators debated the implications of the leak, often highlighting the cruelty and irresponsibility of disseminating personal medical information. Meghan and Harry's careful, principled approach allowed them to redirect attention from scandal-driven speculation to meaningful discussion about privacy, consent, and accountability. At the same time, the couple's unity became a visible and powerful statement. Meghan and Harry were no longer seen as isolated figures caught in a relentless media machine. They emerged as a partnership defined by loyalty, resilience, and shared purpose. Their public interactions conveyed strength and mutual support, reinforcing the message that they would not allow external forces to dictate the terms of their lives or their narrative. The ripple effect of their strategy extended beyond media relations. Their advocacy for privacy and ethical journalism resonated with public audiences, leading to broader discussions about the responsibility of media outlets in handling sensitive information. Supporters lauded the couple's courage in confronting an invasive leak head-on, while critics who had initially engaged in speculation found themselves challenged by the evidence of thoughtful, principled action. Harry and Meghan's handling of the situation became a case study in how public figures could reclaim agency in the face of personal attacks, demonstrating that dignity, preparation, and strategy could transform vulnerability into empowerment. This chapter in their lives also had a lasting impact on how they approached their future engagements. Having faced one of the most invasive breaches of personal privacy possible, Harry and Meghan implemented new protocols for managing their personal information, vetting communications, and protecting their family. They became proactive guardians of their narrative, ensuring that future developments would be framed on their terms rather than left to the whims of media speculation. Ultimately, the leak of Meghan's medical records, while devastating, became a catalyst for growth, resilience, and empowerment. Harry and Meghan emerged not only as survivors of a deeply personal attack, but as advocates for privacy, ethical journalism, and the protection of personal boundaries in an increasingly intrusive digital age. Their strategic response, unity, and courage allowed them to take control of the narrative, redefine public perception, and create a framework for handling challenges with dignity and purpose. The story of Meghan Markle's medical records leak and the subsequent revelations about her inability to carry children is not merely a tale of scandal or sensational headlines. It is a story of resilience, strategy, and the human struggle to protect what is most personal in an age of relentless scrutiny. The events that unfolded have left an indelible mark, not just on Meghan and Harry, but on the wider conversation about privacy, media responsibility, and the cost of public life. From the moment the leak occurred, the world watched with a mix of shock, curiosity, and judgment. Headlines screamed, social media erupted, and every news outlet sought to dissect, analyze, and speculate. The public, too, was drawn into the drama, debating the implications, questioning narratives, and forming opinions based on fragments of information. Amid this storm, Meghan faced one of the most personal and invasive challenges imaginable, a violation of her most private medical history. The revelation that she could never carry children was not just a private matter. It had been thrust into the global spotlight, weaponized, and dissected by those with little regard for her dignity or well-being. Yet in the midst of this turmoil, Meghan and Harry demonstrated a remarkable capacity for calm, deliberate action. Their response was not fueled by anger alone, nor by a desire for revenge. It was a calculated, principled, and deeply human approach to reclaiming control over their lives and their narrative. Through strategic legal action, careful media engagement, and direct communication with the public, they began to shift the conversation. They transformed a moment of vulnerability into a powerful statement about agency, dignity, and the right to privacy. The couple's unity became a symbol in itself. Their shared determination and mutual support sent a clear message. External forces, no matter how powerful or invasive, would not define them or dictate the terms of their story. This partnership, forged in the crucible of public scrutiny and personal violation, illustrated the strength that can emerge when individuals face adversity together. They were no longer merely subjects of media fascination. They became agents of change, advocates for personal rights, and exemplars of resilience in the face of unprecedented challenges. The public's perception began to evolve. What started as a scandal focused on intrusion and personal betrayal gradually shifted toward a broader conversation about ethics, privacy, and accountability. Journalists, commentators, and media watchdogs began to scrutinize the leak itself, highlighting the ethical violations and the dangers of spreading deeply personal information without consent. Conversations emerged about the responsibility of media institutions to respect boundaries and protect individuals from harm. In many ways, Meghan and Harry's strategic response set a precedent, demonstrating that privacy is not an optional privilege but a fundamental right that must be defended. At the same time, this chapter in their lives had a profound personal impact. Meghan, having endured the exposure of her most intimate vulnerabilities, emerged with a renewed sense of self and empowerment. She confronted the pain, the judgment, and the intrusion, transforming it into a source of strength and clarity. Harry, by her side, became not only a protector but also a collaborator in shaping the public discourse, balancing advocacy with measured communication. Together, they turned a deeply personal challenge into a lesson in resilience, strategy, and human dignity. The ripple effects extended beyond personal empowerment. Their experience sparked dialogue about broader societal issues. The treatment of women in the public eye, the exploitation of personal information, and the ethical responsibilities of media institutions. By reclaiming their narrative, Meghan and Harry encouraged others to question accepted norms, to challenge intrusive practices, and to assert the importance of personal agency. Their story became both a cautionary tale and a blueprint for responding to invasions of privacy with dignity, strategy, and purpose. In reflecting on these events, one realizes that the leak of Meghan's medical records was more than a scandal. It was a defining moment. It illuminated the pressures faced by those living under constant scrutiny, the vulnerabilities inherent in public life, and the potential for resilience when individuals take deliberate, principled action. It reminded the world that behind every headline, every rumor, and every viral post, there is a human being with emotions, dignity, and rights that deserve respect. The narrative comes full circle when we consider the lessons of this story. Meghan and Harry's handling of the crisis illustrates the power of unity, strategic thinking, and moral clarity. It demonstrates that even in the face of the most invasive and personal attacks, individuals can assert control, reclaim their narrative, and transform vulnerability into empowerment. It is a testament to the enduring human spirit and the capacity to rise above challenges with courage, integrity, and purpose. As viewers and participants in this ongoing story, we are invited to reflect on our own roles in the dissemination of information, the treatment of public figures, and the value we place on privacy and dignity. The story does not end with the scandal. It continues in the way we choose to engage with the world, how we respect boundaries, and how we support those who face undue intrusion and judgment. Ultimately, the leak of Meghan Markle's medical records and the confirmation of her inability to carry children is not merely a moment of shock. It is a profound illustration of resilience, agency, and the human capacity to reclaim control in a world that often seeks to strip it away. Meghan and Harry's journey through this crisis serves as both a warning and an inspiration, highlighting the importance of protecting one's narrative, standing firm in the face of adversity, and asserting the dignity that is inherent in every human life. What do you think about their response to such an unprecedented invasion of privacy? How do you view the balance between public curiosity and personal boundaries? Share your thoughts in the comments, and consider the implications of this story in your own life and society at large. This is more than gossip. It is a conversation about respect, integrity, and the strength to stand firm when the world seeks to define you. Their story closes, but the conversation continues. It challenges us to think, reflect, and act with greater awareness, reminding us that truth, dignity, and resilience are forces that can withstand even the most invasive storms. Meghan and Harry have turned an unprecedented crisis into a testament of agency, proving that no matter the scrutiny, human dignity and personal truth can never be fully compromised. The story of Meghan Markle's medical records leak and the subsequent revelations about her inability to carry children is not merely a tale of scandal or sensational headlines. It is a story of resilience, strategy, and the human struggle to protect what is most personal in an age of relentless scrutiny. The events that unfolded have left an indelible mark, not just on Meghan and Harry, but on the wider conversation about privacy, media responsibility, and the cost of public life. From the moment the leak occurred, the world watched with a mix of shock, curiosity, and judgment. Headlines screamed, social media erupted, and every news outlet sought to dissect, analyze, and speculate. The public, too, was drawn into the drama, debating the implications, questioning narratives, and forming opinions based on fragments of information. Amid this storm, Meghan faced one of the most personal and invasive challenges imaginable, a violation of her most private medical history. The revelation that she could never carry children was not just a private matter. It had been thrust into the global spotlight, weaponized, and dissected by those with little regard for her dignity or well-being. Yet in the midst of this turmoil, Meghan and Harry demonstrated a remarkable capacity for calm, deliberate action. Their response was not fueled by anger alone, nor by a desire for revenge. It was a calculated, principled, and deeply human approach to reclaiming control over their lives and their narrative. Through strategic legal action, careful media engagement, and direct communication with the public, they began to shift the conversation. They transformed a moment of vulnerability into a powerful statement about agency, dignity, and the right to privacy. The couple's unity became a symbol in itself. Their shared determination and mutual support sent a clear message. External forces, no matter how powerful or invasive, would not define them or dictate the terms of their story. This partnership, forged in the crucible of public scrutiny and personal violation, illustrated the strength that can emerge when individuals face adversity together. They were no longer merely subjects of media fascination. They became agents of change, advocates for personal rights, and exemplars of resilience in the face of unprecedented challenges. The public's perception began to evolve. What started as a scandal focused on intrusion and personal betrayal gradually shifted toward a broader conversation about ethics, privacy, and accountability. Journalists, commentators, and media watchdogs began to scrutinize the leak itself, highlighting the ethical violations and the dangers of spreading deeply personal information without consent. Conversations emerged about the responsibility of media institutions to respect boundaries and protect individuals from harm. In many ways, Meghan and Harry's strategic response set a precedent, demonstrating that privacy is not an optional privilege but a fundamental right that must be defended. At the same time, this chapter in their lives had a profound personal impact. Meghan, having endured the exposure of her most intimate vulnerabilities, emerged with a renewed sense of self and empowerment. She confronted the pain, the judgment, and the intrusion, transforming it into a source of strength and clarity. Harry, by her side, became not only a protector but also a collaborator in shaping the public discourse, balancing advocacy with measured communication. Together, they turned a deeply personal challenge into a lesson in resilience, strategy, and human dignity. The ripple effects extended beyond personal empowerment. Their experience sparked dialogue about broader societal issues, the treatment of women in the public eye, the exploitation of personal information, and the ethical responsibilities of media institutions. By reclaiming their narrative, Meghan and Harry encouraged others to question accepted norms, to challenge intrusive practices, and to assert the importance of personal agency. Their story became both a cautionary tale and a blueprint for responding to invasions of privacy with dignity, strategy, and purpose. In reflecting on these events, one realizes that the leak of Meghan's medical records was more than a scandal. It was a defining moment. It illuminated the pressures faced by those living under constant scrutiny, the vulnerabilities inherent in public life, and the potential for resilience when individuals take deliberate, principled action. It reminded the world that behind every headline, every rumor, and every viral post, there is a human being with emotions, dignity, and rights that deserve respect. The narrative comes full circle when we consider the lessons of this story. Meghan and Harry's handling of the crisis illustrates the power of unity, strategic thinking, and moral clarity. It demonstrates that even in the face of the most invasive and personal attacks, individuals can assert control, reclaim their narrative, and transform vulnerability into empowerment. It is a testament to the enduring human spirit and the capacity to rise above challenges with courage, integrity, and purpose. As viewers and participants in this ongoing story, we are invited to reflect on our own roles in the dissemination of information, the treatment of public figures, and the value we place on privacy and dignity. The story does not end with the scandal. It continues in the way we choose to engage with the world, how we respect boundaries, and how we support those who face undue intrusion and judgment. Ultimately, the leak of Meghan Markle's medical records and the confirmation of her inability to carry children is not merely a moment of shock. It is a profound illustration of resilience, agency, and the human capacity to reclaim control in a world that often seeks to strip it away. Meghan and Harry's journey through this crisis serves as both a warning and an inspiration, highlighting the importance of protecting one's narrative, standing firm in the face of adversity, and asserting the dignity that is inherent in every human life. What do you think about their response to such an unprecedented invasion of privacy? How do you view the balance between public curiosity and personal boundaries? Share your thoughts in the comments, and consider the implications of this story in your own life and society at large. This is more than gossip. It is a conversation about respect, integrity, and the strength to stand firm when the world seeks to define you. Their story closes, but the conversation continues. It challenges us to think, reflect, and act with greater awareness, reminding us that truth, dignity, and resilience are forces that can withstand even the most invasive storms. Meghan and Harry have turned an unprecedented crisis into a testament of agency, proving that no matter the scrutiny, human dignity and personal truth can never be fully compromised.